Hi everyone, this is Kim and I am going to be presenting option 2, which is a learning tool that describes the detailed anatomy of the respiratory system, starting in the nose and ending in the alveoli. Okay, starting with the upper respiratory tract, we have the nares, which are also called the nostrils, and they're the openings into the nose. The internal chambers of the nose are called the nasal cavity. So this area here. Within the nasal cavity, we have tissue folds that contain blood vessels. These are called the nasal conchae, and there are 3 of them. The first one on top is the superior conchae. Below that is the middle in the blue, and then in the green is the inferior. And they are separated by nasal meatus. And these are passageways for the air. And then there's 3 nasal meatuses. Superior, so this line here, middle, and inferior. After the nasal cavity, we have the pharynx, and that's the primary function of the pharynx is to carry air between the nasal cavity and the larynx. There are 3 portions to the pharynx. First is the nasal pharynx, which I've outlined here in the green outline. And then we have the middle part, which is the oropharynx, which I've outlined in the red here. And then the last part of the pharynx in the outlined in blue here is the laryngopharynx. The nasopharynx is a passageway for air. The oropharynx is the passageway for air and food. And then the laryngopharynx is a passageway for air and food. I did also include the pharyngeal tonsil right up here. And that functions to provide immunity protection. Moving on to the lower respiratory tract, we have the larynx on top, which is known as the voice box. The larynx functions in carrying air between the pharynx and the trachea. It also aids in sound production and prevents food from entering into the trachea. Below the larynx, we have the trachea, also known as the windpipe. It's made of C-shaped cartilage rings, which act as a passageway for air to move into the lungs. And then it splits into 2 to the right and left main bronchi. Right and left. This is where it splits. The bronchial tree is a network of highly branched air tubes that carry air into and out of the deep tissues of the lungs. And there are 2 of them, 2 main bronchi, right and left, that go to each lung. So the bronchi are large branches that carry air into and out of the lungs. The main bronchi splits again when it goes into each of the lungs. And then each branch of that split is called lobar bronchi, L-O-B-A-R. And then there's 3 sets of those in each of the lungs. So superior, middle, and inferior. Once the lobar bronchi, they split to form the segmental bronchi. So those are just branches off of the lobar. So you have the main, the lobar, the 3 lobars, And then those split further again for the segmental bronchi. Here's another view, but this time I included the lungs. So we have the larynx in the red, the trachea, and then we have the main bronchi, right and left. And then we have the left lung, right lung. The right lung has 3 lobes: superior, middle, and inferior. And the left lobe only has 2 lobes: superior and inferior. The top of the lung is called the apex, and the bottom is called the base. The respiratory bronchioles lead to the alveolar ducts and alveoli. The alveoli are microscopic air sacs found on respiratory bronchioles. There are millions of these in each lung, and they are the main site of gas exchange in the lungs. The alveoli are, they're like clustered soap bubbles, not spheroidal like grapes. As you can see here, the clusters. The arteries travel alongside the bronchi, and then they give rise to the blood capillaries into the wall of each alveolus. They unload the CO2 and picked up around the body, and then it exhales it from the lungs, and then they pick up fresh oxygen from inhaled air. And then the oxygenated blood returns to the heart by the pulmonary veins. Here's a closer look at the alveoli. I have them in green. The sacs are in green, sorry. And then I have the pulmonary arteriole and the pulmonary venule in red. The capillary networks are here. They surround each alveoli.